Welcome to our final session of our second workshop on conditional indirect effects. In this session, we'll be covering dual-stage moderated mediation. So the agenda for today is, again, pretty simple. Let's think about how we theorize and then how we test for these dual-stage models. I must tell you since the beginning that we don't see many dual-stage models in our journals. This is also an opportunity to start looking at dual-stage models, but also a liability, if you will, because models can get too complex and very difficult to explain. So I would rather, if you want, err on the parsimonious side and have stage 1 or stage 2 models, but if you have a strong theoretical argument for having dual-stage models, go for it. We can definitely learn from these models. So dual-stage models, we have two moderators, basically. We have a moderator that is in the first stage and a moderator that's in the second stage of this indirect effect. So the first stage, do you remember, is in this first path. So we are looking for the interactive term of the independent variable and moderator 1 on the mediator. And the second stage is the second path, the path between the mediator and the dependent variable. And we'll be looking at the interaction term between the mediator and the second moderator on the dependent variable. So you can find a few papers that describe these dual-stage models. One, for example, is Lu, Liao, and Loy in 2012. You can go back to that paper and take a look on how they describe these models. The first step when conducting these dual-stage models is to theorize about the indirect effect. Again, the starting point for moderated mediation models is the indirect effect. That's different from mediated moderation models, in which the first step is the moderation. Okay? So here we are looking at the indirect effect. So theorize about the effects of the independent variable on the dependent variable via a mediator. And then in step 2, we theorize about the relationship between our independent variable and our mediator being a function of the moderator 1. Okay? So we are looking at the interaction term and the effects of that interaction term on the mediator. And for our third step, and this is different, we are adding another moderation. We are looking at the indirect or the effect, if the effects of our mediator on the dependent variable varies based on levels of our moderator 2. So in this case, we are looking at the interaction term between mediator and moderator 2 on the dependent variable. And finally, we theorize about this overall more complex model, if you will, and we are theorizing that the effects of the independent variable on the dependent variable via the mediator can change based on different levels of our first moderator or our our second moderator, I should say. How do we test for that? Pretty similar to what we've been doing so far. We first run a mediation model, and we adopt Hayes process macro for that. And the step 2, we run a traditional test of moderation, and we are looking at the relationship, the interaction term of the independent variable and moderator on the mediator. Step 3 is a similar moderation model, but now we are looking at the interaction term between the mediator and our second moderator and that effect on our dependent variable. And then we adopt process. Now we are looking at model number 29. It's important to choose the correct model again. In one of our prior sessions, I mentioned that there are more than 70 models. And it's critical to select the correct model, otherwise you may have error terms or just bogus output or outcomes that you don't test for your theoretical model. Finally, you look at the bootstrapping analysis and the output of that. So let's do it. Our dataset, the dataset that we shared with you, has all these variables here. And you'll be able to conduct this analysis if you decided to download this dataset. If you have your own dataset and you have different moderators, feel free to adopt that dataset as well, and you can run your own models. The steps will be the same, just the variable names will be different. The first step is to test for the mediation. Remember? So we are looking at the indirect effect of meaningfulness on performance via job engagement. Let's run the analysis. Click on Analyze, Regression, and Process. And don't forget to select model number 4. We are conducting a mediation analysis here. And then we just enter dependent variable is our performance, independent variable is our meaningfulness, and engagement is our mediator. Don't forget to select the total effect and also the Sobol test. We don't use Sobol tests anymore because we know, based on Monte Carlo simulations, that the indirect effect coefficient is not normally distributed. So the Sobol test has this assumption that the indirect effect is normal distributed. So instead of using the Sobol test, we look at the bootstrapping analysis. But for completeness, we are getting the Sobol test here. Click on OK, and you should see the output. Again, we are not covering the output. You can watch this session about mediation to get more details on how to conduct mediations and how to interpret the outputs from mediation models. The second step is to run this moderation model in which we have the interaction term between meaningfulness and organization identification, and we look for the significance of that interaction term on our mediator, job engagement. We go to Analyze, Regression, Process. Our outcome variable will be engagement. Our independent variable will be meaningfulness. And our moderator will be organization identification. Because we are conducting a moderation model analysis, model number 1. And don't forget to mean-center the products to avoid multicollinearity issues, and print the matrix that we get covariance coefficients. Click on OK, you get the output. And now we have our test, our step 3, in which we are conducting a different moderation test. And we are looking for the interactive effects of meaningfulness and the task complexity on performance. And it's pretty similar to what we just did in our step 2. The only difference is that we are changing our outcome variable. Now we have performance as our outcome. We have engagement as our independent independent variable, and the task complexity as our moderator. We still have model number 1. We still need to mean-center the products and get all the coefficients for our covariance matrix. And just clicking on OK, you get the output. For these 2 moderation models, you can go back and watch the session on moderation, and you'll have a more thorough explanation on how to interpret and plot the interaction terms. Finally, we are conducting our model and the testing for these dual-stage moderated mediation models. We needed to select model 29. Remember, selecting the right model is extremely important when you are running process macro. So go to process, and now you have to select model 29. And what's interesting and different here is that you have the same performance, meaningfulness, and engagement, but now you have your stage 1 moderator in the W position, and you have your stage 2 moderator in the V position. It's important to put this variable in the right places, otherwise you'll get error terms or output that is not interpretable. Mean center the products and print the covariance matrix. Click on OK and you get the output. So in the output, you first double check that you select the correct model, model 29. And then you can check the variable names: performance, meaningfulness, engagement, organization identification, and task complexity. Yeah, everything is there. Scroll down on your output and you'll see the 2 different steps there. Okay. Or actually, in this case, you'll see just one step with the covariance matrix. So in step 1, you will be looking at the interaction term 1 and that effect on job engagement. And the interaction term 1 should be meaningfulness times organization identification. We do find a significant relationship between this interaction term and engagement. P is less than 0.05. And here you have the covariance matrix for these parameters. Okay. You will need these coefficients to plot the interaction and actually run simple slope analysis. And then we have our second step, in which we have a bunch of different coefficients, and we'll go through them. So what we are looking for here is if the interaction term between our mediator and our second moderator, if that interaction terms is significantly related to our dependent variable. And you'll see that there are 3 different interaction terms here. We have interaction term number 2, which is engagement times task complexity. We have interaction term number 3, which is meaningfulness times organization identification. And we do have interaction term number 4, which is meaningfulness times task complexity. Which one should we be looking at here? We should be looking at interaction term number 2, okay, job engagement and task complexity, and that effect on job performance. If we look here, we do find that interaction term number 2 has a significant relationship with performance. P is less than 0.05. The other 2 interaction terms are controls in this model. We are partialing out the effects of these other 2 interaction terms on our dependent variable, task performance. And down here we have the covariance matrix for all of these coefficients. So yeah, this gets a little bit more complicated now. And this is why I said at the beginning that we should aim to a parsimonious model. So dual stage models are cool to run, but it can get a little bit more complex. And why? Let's take a look at the output here. So we are looking at the indirect effect of job meaningfulness on performance via job engagement. And we are also testing if that indirect effect changes based on values of organization identification and task complexity. So here we have our mediator, and here we have different levels of our first mediator, or moderator, I should say, and our second moderator, organization identification and task complexity. When we look at high levels of organization identification, we do find a significant indirect effect for those individuals who are at the mean or perceive complexity as low. So those individuals who are high in organization identification and see task complexity as being low, the indirect effect of meaningfulness on performance via engagement is significant. There is no zero in the confidence interval. For those individuals who are low on organization identification, well, we don't have a significant relationship or indirect effect, I should say, because regardless of the level of task complexity, zero is in the confidence interval of our bootstrap analysis. So if you are low in organization identification, it doesn't matter the level of task complexity. If you are high in organization identification, yeah, if task complexity is not too complex, if you will, the indirect effect of meaningfulness on performance via job engagement is significant. In this final session of our second workshop on conditional indirect effects, we covered dual stage models. Next, we will be talking about, we have a different workshop on multi-level analysis, and we'll be looking at the relationship of independent variables on dependent variables that are nested within departments, within leaders, within organizations. So we needed to take that nesting into consideration. I hope to see you in our third workshop on multi-level analysis. Thank you.